This is a tutorial about the stats in Grim Dawn. Most of this applies to the base game, but some of the specifics that I'm going to point out do refer to the Infinity mod specifically. So this is the asset manager. So you always start up with work offline, select which mod you're going to be using, and then this is going to be your database. So I'm going to use this reference guide that I've created here to go over a couple of the things. So we're going to start off with here the death penalty. This is basically just showing in the asset manager exactly where that is. So we're just going to go to that location. So that is in the database, and that is in records in game. So game engine on here. This has a lot of your main stats and controls. That one's under rewards and penalties. So right here, this is the death penalty. I have this set to 0 right now just because I'm testing. Normally this is an equation that's on here that's going to be based on your level versus a certain amount. And then you can set minimum and maximum amounts for how much you lose. The experience equations on here, this is something that I've customized because I'm using static leveling. That's normally a formula as well. I just use the set experience. So when I go over to a creature on here, I have a set amount. So it's just going to pull this specific amount, and then it doesn't care what your level is or what the discrepancy is between you and the mob. It's always going to apply this amount. But again, that's something that I've done custom for this mod specifically. Same thing with a lot of these things like the levels here. It's always going to be a level 1 mod. The normal base game is set to where this is going to be like your character level times 1 or something like that. So the character level is typically the discrepancy between forcing the mobs to scale up to your level. There's other options in here too, like number of slots. Number of slots is basically how large the object is. So if you have a world boss or something like that, it's going to have a lot more areas to be able to hit. They're kind of like mini hitboxes for it. So the second thing on the list is the level formula. So we're going to go back to the database on here and over to records and creatures. And this is going to be player character on here, so player levels. So level up parameters on here shows, this is something if you just want to make a simple mod for just altering some of the stuff, this is how many skill points that you get, how many points you gain per level, the initial amount of points. Life increment is actually strength increment. That's how many life points or HP you get per point of strength, dex, and int. So what I've done here in my mod specifically is I've zeroed these out. So you don't gain any health by gaining strength and dexterity. That's mainly damage and evasion and hit ratio. And then when you increase intelligence, it's basically using that as the formula that for every point of intelligence you would gain 6. So you can control this in your own game and make it whatever you want, how much mana you get. Strength increment, and these down at the bottom, mean that when you apply a point of strength, that's how many you get. So normally when you do that, the base I think is around 8. So every time you increase your strength, you gain 8 points of it. Because I have so many levels on here and you can pretty much level indefinitely, I'm only giving you 1 point per allocation on there. So max level is in here as well. That is experience levels. So on here right now, one of the reasons why I've capped this is because just for testing purposes, you can halt the game if you automatically run to a situation when you're testing and you just gain 40,000 levels at once. It'll try to like manually go through a loop and calculate them all. So you just want to be careful of that. The equation on here, I've used a very simplistic equation that just has a minor scaling on there that will basically just always make it to where you just need a little bit more EXP on there. The HP and health regenerate, so that is, and I'll show you here basically what I'm going off of. So I'm going off of this again. So we have database records and then game. and then the player resource behavior on here. So it's these equations. Now I've modified these again because this is for the Infinity Dawn mod. So these will probably be adjusted a little bit more as balancing comes out, but this actually is working pretty decently. So one of the things that I've included is as you level with your character, you will automatically gain a point of life regeneration for every 5 levels and 7 for mana. Life regen on here would be basically all of your allocated stats that you gained in the game, and then you also gain an extra point for every 15 points of intelligence you apply. You also gain more regen as well as that life, and then that's just a multiplier by the time elapsing in the game. Constitution on here is database records, creatures, PC, and the male and female PC, and that is under character parameters. So these are basically the base attributes that you have whenever you start the game. So on here, 250 health and then 50 of the stats on here. Speed, movement, and stuff if you want to change the defaults of some of the maximums on here. What your default regen rate is, and then constitution on here. Now I've stripped it out of here because I didn't really like that mechanic as well, where it seems like it's kind of, you're always trying to really cheese off of that rather than using your own life regen and potions and health skills and stuff like that. So that would have been 300 by default, but again, you can modify that to whatever you want it to be. The stack limit for items on there is under database. Go back. And records game. And that one is under the game engine as well, under one shot. So on here, there are a couple locations to some of these things that I've noticed in here that there's kind of multiple, like devotion points. I noticed that there's at least 2 places for that. So you may need to adjust multiple things. So I'm kind of testing that out. But I did notice in my game, I am definitely going over 100 potions on there. When you look at the menu, the bar down at the bottom of the screen, it'll show 99 on there, but your inventory will show that there's more. That just the display at the bottom for usage of that item just will limit it to 99, but you can have more than that. So the delay between attacks for creatures in the game. So database records controllers. So one of the examples here is the Screecher. Now that's that little, it's like a little Sonic type of thing. Is basically like a little debuff. So attacking minimum max. So there's a lot of different things in here, like if the mob is ever going to flee, how far it will chase, like the pursuit distance and stuff like that, when it's going to use skills, and basically what it's going to do. So one of the things with those skeleton guardians that I have is they don't roam anywhere because I just wanted them to kind of guard specific location. So there's a bunch of different sets. So the controller is basically the AI for each mob. So the mob swings on here. What's the pause time in between, and kind of basically like kind of an attack speed, or more choosing how quickly that they'll choose to reuse a skill. And then one of the things that's built in here by default is, so enemies have a bunch of different skills that you can apply, but the skills are not just the normal attacks that they do. It's going to be a lot of things like passives, resistances, special skills, and stuff like that. Now I have these very simplified, not only because this is a basic mob, but I've stripped out a lot of this stuff. The only one that I'm really using for just the default is going to be resistances and the physical damage on there. And the reason for that is there's basically alternatives. And the way that I'm doing it, where I'm not scaling mobs, I assign specific values to that. So one of the things that normally would have been on here is an armor by default, but I'm doing that a little bit differently. So on here for this Walking Dead, for character parameters on here, I think it's under here. Okay, that one I might need to look that one up. Oh, here it is. So under the bio, the natural resistance is on here. What you can do is apply this. So this basically has 6 armor value for physical defense, and then you can apply these as well, and a lot of basic resistances. But you can also just apply a skill to it, which basically says that like they've created them for a specific, like a skeleton will have resistances, certain amount of poison and things like that just by default. So you can also just apply kind of a template like that. So every time you have a skeleton type creature, you apply all the resistances that go along with it. And then this just allows you to do it as a customization. So every single one of the creatures that I have in there has basically like a specific physical defense or armor on there. And then I can apply specific things if I want to add these, or using the template. So I'll probably be using a combination of both of those actually. And then for the stats of things on here, so there's actually 2 different locations. Now this one actually ties to the bio. So this basically has linking over to the bio for The Walking Dead. But you can also do that on here as well. I did find it still easier to do it from the bio, but you can, this is basically the same thing. You could fill them in here about what the regeneration rate and stuff is. One of the differences on here though, is that the array makes it so you have to do a little bit more. So you have to click on this, you have to select this value and then enter it. So if you're modifying these a lot, it's a little bit more difficult than just going to the bio. An array is basically just a set of numbers. So it's basically like just a 1, 2, 4, 9, like a set like that. And they would use that typically for something like if you're using skill level 1, then it uses the first value. Skill level 2 uses the second value and stuff like that. So the bio is what I'm tying to. That was the default that's in the game. So it basically is using these as the stats for it. And these can be equations as well, but on my mod specifically, again, I use this specific static. So this mob doesn't really have other levels or power. Whenever you encounter that, it's always going to have these specific stats for it. And there is quite a bit of other stuff to go through, but for right now, I'm going to kind of cut off the video here, and we'll maybe follow up with more on stats a little bit later. So thanks a lot for watching.